Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our webinar today, Who's in Charge Here? Harnessing the Power of Homeschoolers While Fostering Relevancy with All Students. I'm Jamie Machek with the Nicolay Federated Library System in Green Bay, and I'm glad all of you are joining us this afternoon. So our presenter today is Gina Wilson, and Gina holds her MLIS from the University of Alabama, and she is currently the director of the Thomasville Public Library in Clark County, Alabama, where it is currently a balmy sunny degrees and 70 degrees and sunny. So she's feeling a little bad for us here in the northern part. So Gina, whenever you are ready, please go ahead.
Okay, Jamie, thank you. And I would like to thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak with you today. I first talked on this topic at the ARSL conference in Little Rock in 2015. Just a little, just to give you a perspective on our library here in Alabama, we're a very small library. We have a little over 4,000 square feet, and we have 3 full-time and several part-time that work here. Although my service population is under 9,000, my visitor count in 2015 was over 45,000. We do tons of things for the community because they're not available elsewhere. So, you know, we offer a broad range of services, and basically anything that we can do, we try to do for the community. Our computer usage is pretty robust, and that is definitely a need that we have. I would estimate about half of our population does not have a good internet connection at home. So I would like to share my good news with you today in Wisconsin. In January, we received a donation of a building in downtown Thomasville, which is just a couple of blocks off of the main 4-lane highway that runs through our town. We have plans to renovate the building and expand the building, and our mayor announced in January a $3.5 million project to build a new library here. And a large part of what we want to do is to reach out to adults that are looking for jobs. And we're pulling in people from about 4 counties right now, so that's where we're headed. As far as the student population in Thomasville, our student population is a huge percentage of service population. So we do a lot of services for K-12 age students. All in all, we have over 2,000 in that age range, and I break it down to public, private, and homeschooled. The homeschooled kids that's not a hard number, because in Alabama, kids don't have to start, they don't have to technically start until age 7, and so the numbers, you know, are kind of fluid here. But I can tell you that our homeschool population is very robust, and they're very supportive of the library. I actually homeschooled for 10 years, and so I was a power user of the library during that time. And as a librarian now, I try to be supportive of all the student groups, and then we train our staff to do that as well. So if we take just a quick look at homeschoolers in the United States, this movement has been growing for more than, I would say, around 2 decades. It's been growing, and now we're looking at about 1.7 million home-educated students in the United States. If you want to check out some stats, you can go to nces.ed.gov, or you can also go, I found some good information at timeforlearning.com. And interestingly enough, I was looking at some web information for Wisconsin. And unlike Alabama, in Alabama, There are some academic requirements, and if those aren't met, then the students have to enroll through a church school. But that's not the case in Wisconsin, and on the Wisconsin website, I actually saw for beginners, do I have what it takes to homeschool my children? And the answer included the local public library. So Wisconsin Parents Association is actually promoting newbies to seek materials from the library. So you're definitely a strong part of the equation for beginning homeschoolers. In another place on the website, they basically say order the handbook, and with a handbook and a public library, you can homeschool very inexpensively. So you can see that homeschooling parents are being directed to the library for help, and so you can just, expect them to come in and to engage you as they begin their homeschooling journey. Jamie, do we have any questions?
I'm not seeing anything at this time, but Leah mentioned that WPA has a ton of information that is helpful for beginning homeschoolers about the law, etc., and that is a good place to refer people. So I wanted to pass that along.
That's absolutely the best reference that I found for Wisconsin. Also, there's an organization called HSLDA.org, and you can go to that website and then to any particular state if you want to know the legalities of homeschooling. I don't know if you all are familiar with KUDZU, but I tell you, around Alabama, KUDZU kind of gets a bad reputation. It's defined as a lush green mind. That sounds awesome. But what we have found here is that it's so lush and it grows so easily that it means well, but it can pretty much take over any area that it comes in contact with. The reason I bring KUDZU up is because we jokingly refer to homeschooling families coming in as the KUDZU effect, because they often arrive as a family and they can seem to take over every available space at the front desk. So when we see them coming in, we have a big smile, but we also kind of take a deep breath and we say, wow, they're here. So I don't know if it's like that at your library, but they come in and they're ready to interact when they come in the door. What do homeschoolers want? I studied this, I would say, about a year as I was working on my master's, and I finished my master's just a few years ago. So I noticed that as I interacted with homeschoolers here at my library, and also as I went to different meetings, I noticed that some librarians have a negative perception of the homeschooling subgroup of students. And it made me curious, and I thought I would do a little digging, and it actually turned into a really neat research project. Homeschoolers' wants are similar to those of students and parents from public and private school settings. I would ask you this: are you on good terms with your local schools? If you're not, then you should evaluate which factors are prohibiting collaboration with your local schools. Maybe you will need to get input from some of your stakeholders, and I would suggest that you just host a meeting and don't have an agenda other than, just bring in a blank sheet and say, I'm looking for ideas on how to improve relationships with students. The bottom line is that a public library serving K-12 is well within your mission, and so you need to make every effort to serve all of the K-12 population. One thing that I've noticed is that the homeschoolers are so engaging, and so it's just so easy to provide services for them. And I would caution you to avoid favoring one student population over another, because all students need the library. and we need the support and the trust of all students. Therefore, best practice is to avoid special events during school hours unless you can do it for all the student groups. If you can't afford this, then I recommend that you schedule most of your events after regular school hours so that all students have the choice of attending. When we boil down what homeschoolers want in digital services, they like a robust website, they like online and phone reference help, they love online reservations, and they like information sharing via social media. I wonder if your library has Facebook, an active Facebook page. If it does, then you'll probably have some good interactions on there with your homeschooling patrons. Jamie, any questions?
Not at this time.
Okay, well, let's move on. What do homeschoolers want at the library? They like group tours. They love events during school hours. They want free meeting space, and they like free classes and workshops. Parent educators, I look at homeschoolers as actually two groups. They're students and they're parent educators. So, we kind of lump everything in and talk about homeschooling families, but actually you can divide this and you can look at what the students are looking for. You can also talk with the parents, and they really would like to have extended due dates, special borrowing privileges, and robust interlibrary loans. Now, for us, interlibrary loans are becoming a bit obsolete, especially with e-books, and so we feel a lot of requests with e-books because a lot of our patrons have e-readers, iPads, or Kindles. So, as a librarian, can you embrace this statement? Do you love homeschoolers? If you could see me, I'm about to laugh. I have a big smile on my face. I absolutely love homeschoolers. They are huge supporters of my library. But I find that I'm challenged by homeschoolers because they ask for a lot. Studies reveal that some common behaviors that are the root cause of the negative perceptions that we have can be addressed if we will just plan, have clear policies, and train our staff to interact with homeschoolers in the right way. So it's all about engagement. Now, in my research, I found that U.S. librarians, and I'm not lumping all librarians into this group because that would not be fair. As librarians, we never want to stereotype anyone. But the research shows that as librarians were questioned and interviewed, that we could boil down their concerns to a short list. Librarians are concerned with excessive use, aka the KUDZU effect. They'll come in, they kind of take over the space. They want a lot of books. They often want a lot of books on one subject, and they want to keep them for a long time. Another thing that causes us to have a negative perception might be that the library is not adequately funded or staffed to interact with a large group in a short period of time. The third thing that we'll look at is attempted censorship and also control of the collection and book challenges. Now let's look at number one, concerns with excessive use. I think that's a win right there because a busy library is a relevant library, right? Okay, number two, inadequate staffing and funding. This is where you can use numbers to track usage and advocate for more staff. Number three, attempted censorship and control of the collection, book challenges. That's not specific to homeschoolers, so let's be fair. That's just a challenge, and it happens all the time in public libraries. So I think this is just free speech. That's the American way. I love democracy, and I welcome challenges. These are just a chance to exchange ideas. So, I don't know if I hit on any topics that you've experienced at your library. If so, I think we can discuss later, and I honestly think that if you can just maintain perspective and a sense of humor, your engagement with homeschoolers and with other students is going to go up. Let's talk about positive engagement. This picture, this is our small meeting room, and as you can tell, there's a refrigerator in there, and there are some boxes, etc. So we actually have to use a small kitchen to meet. But these kids don't care. These are middle school kids. They come in after school for a book club, and as I'm looking, I see public, private, and homeschool kids in this picture. So we don't have any problem getting the students to do things together.
Gina?
Yes. Yes.
There were a few questions that came in, and I thought I would interrupt because they're a little bit timely, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Someone asked about special events, and she said on one of the screens you mentioned not doing special events during the school day, but then on another screen you mentioned events during the school day. So what do you consider a special event? And she said the majority of our homeschool programs are during the school year.
Right. Well, the homeschool parents, I think on one screen I recommend not to do events during regular school hours, unless you can do events during school hours at the schools also. So, you know, it's all about fairness, but on another screen it did mention that the homeschooling parents like events during school hours because they're just like all the other parents. They're busy, and they would rather do it during school hours than have to do it after school, you know. So they have the luxury of deciding that they would like their kids to do a 1 o'clock event, whereas the kids at school, I'm sure if you ask them, hey, do you want the bus to roll up and pick you up at 1 o'clock and take you to a library event, I feel like a lot of the kids would say yes to that, but they don't have that option. So I think events during school hours are okay as long as you can keep it fair.
Okay.
If that makes any sense.
Yes, thank you.
And also, I talked with a lady in the fall, and she actually told me that she has a weekly homeschool hour at her library every day. And so, you know, I told her, I said, I'm not being critical because, as we know, everything that we do comes down to the local level and what the local population needs. So in her community, if that works for her library and if that meets the needs of the students in the area, then that's fine, you know. But for me here in Thomasville, Alabama, I have to really walk a tightrope, and I have to balance my services. And with a small budget and a small staff, we have actually found here that we have events after traditional school hours because we can't afford to do both. So, you know, for us, it's just we've made the decision. Our book clubs meet at 3:30 so that kids from the public and private can come to the meetings, you know, and things like that. Our teen events, everything is after school hours.
Okay, great. Another question is, what do you think about bending the meeting use room rules for homeschoolers? For example, we allow outside groups to book once a month only, but there is a homeschooling group we allow to book the room once a week.
I really think here's what you have to guard against. You have to guard against making a special rule for one group, and then you might have another group that challenges you because, you know, they'll say not fair. So here's what you do. I'll give you an example. I have a public announcement board. My space is limited on the board, so I have some guidelines that help me to prioritize the use of the board. Okay, so if it's library related, that's top of my list. If it's nonprofit and education focused, that is high on my list. So I think you could look at that in such a way. If you have a homeschooling group and they're wanting to use your room for educational purposes, then that is within your mission as a library. Now, if they are wanting to use the room, overuse it, and other people need the room, then you actually do need to look at that. But the way I feel about it, if that space is not used by anyone else and someone can use it for an educational purpose, I think that's fine.
Okay. Yes, thank you.
All right. So, so what we found here, we did find that, like I said, we would take a deep breath, and when they come in, and it's like, oh. So I must tell you that over the years, we have had some interesting conversations, and I think that as a staff, we do a better job thanks to the homeschoolers that use our library, and they ask for things. And so just look on it as a way to sharpen your librarian skills. Okay, I'm going to continue on with the positive engagement. I believe in being proactive. I don't think we need to react. I think we need to think ahead. So, you've got to at least annually evaluate your services. What worked one year might not be the thing that you want to go with in the next year. You need to have a clear policy, like the meeting room policy. If your policy would allow you to give preference for, a group that's meeting for educational purposes, then that's a clear policy. If your policy plainly says that no group can use the room more than once a month, and you're letting a group use the room more than once a month, I would recommend that you might want to reword that policy slightly. I think you have every right to give priority to groups with an educational purpose as a library. So I think it's fine. It would be, to me, that would be perfectly fair. I don't want someone in there using a room. If I had to decide between an educational group, not-for-profit, and say a local company that sells a product, or a group that's meeting for more of a social reason, to me, there's no contest there. So the education wins for us. So if you're violating your policy over and over again because of a homeschool group using a room, I'm not saying that it's wrong to allow them to use the room. I think it's good, but I do think that you might rewrite the policy so that it's at the discretion of the librarian. And that way you do have a little loophole if you need it. So consistency is key. Everything that someone wants to do here, I always think, can I do this for them? Can I do this for others like them? And can I consistently do this for the next year? And then you go from there. But you've got to keep your sense of humor handy at all times, especially in staff meetings. I will say that homeschoolers are generally very comfortable asking for programs, materials, and services. So don't fall into the trap of saying yes automatically if their request does not meet your library's policy. Homeschoolers are friendly, and they're supportive of the library, and they understand and respect the constraints of budget and staff time. In a polar reaction, don't automatically say no to a request either. Consider your policies and consistently apply them to all requests. In the case where a meeting room is being used against your library's policy, I would strongly recommend that policy be adapted to meet today's information needs. Some of our policies were written 10 years ago, so things change all the time. Catering to any of the student subgroups can alienate the other groups. When in doubt, think it out. When you're asked to do something, I just recommend that you don't say yes or no on the spot. Keep the conversation going. You know, I have a lady that comes up and she has an idea for a book club meeting. So I don't say yes and I don't say no right away. I gather information. I engage the patron, I keep her talking, and then I schedule a follow-up for us to talk again. And so that gives me a little thinking time, you know, if that makes any sense. I don't think that well on my feet, so I try to build in a little thinking time so that I don't, you know, on the spot say yes or no. And I have gotten some really good ideas from parents like that. So I'm a fan of Winston Churchill. I like to plan. If you don't plan, your programs really won't do as well usually. So you want to constantly look at what your community needs, and you want to plan for that. Jamie, any questions?
No. A comment came in, and this person wrote, we have held programs specifically for homeschool students and families since the fall of 2007. We cannot lump all homeschoolers together. They homeschool for different reasons. Religion, a poor experience at a public or parochial school, and fear. So those individuals who are afraid of the public school are also many times afraid of the public library, and we need to recognize those fears.
Yes, they're actually distrustful of government. You know, just a general distrustful of the government, and libraries are considered a governmental institution. And I would say if you're having activities for homeschoolers and their parents, I think that's just fine. I want to give you an example of a couple of things. I mean, it's all in the way you look at it, and it's in the way that you advocate. If someone brings up an issue, you want to be ready to talk to them about your budget, about your staffing, about how you're serving the students in general. We get called out every now and then about, you know, school-age kids being in the library during regular school hours. And, you know, we don't play favorites. I just recognize homeschooling as a valid educational movement, and I don't think they need any excuses to be out during school hours. If their parents have written that into their lesson plans, that's fine. What I don't allow homeschoolers to do is I don't allow them to tell me what programs to present and when to do them. So we offer what we're going to do, and then the homeschooling parents pick what meets their curriculum goals. You know, so they'll participate if they want to, but I think you just need to be kind of careful about having too many events for homeschoolers at the library. It just depends on your local population, but for us here, our city school system is very strong, and we are a city-supported library, and we have a city school system. So we try to work well with that system because the city appreciates when their dollars work together. So, you know, they like to see us collaborate with the schools. So we really go the extra mile to try to do for kids in the regular school environment too. But think about this, all right? If we go to the school and we do a program at the school, I'm really doing a special program during school hours, right? But it's at the school, but it's still a special program during school hours for a group of students. So we don't want to get tied into labels like, you know, the homeschool students, the public, the private. I do student programs during school hours, and yes, sometimes they are for homeschool kids and they are at the library. Sometimes my programs are for kids in the public school system and they are at the school in town. So you see what I mean? It's all in the way you look at it, and you really don't. It's just positive. It's a positive way to look at things, and people often see things from one perspective or another, and you don't want to fall into that trap of taking sides. You strictly want to look at your population and what it needs, and then you need to be very verbal in explaining things if you are asked about things. So I like people to ask questions. Here's my philosophy. This is kind of in a nutshell. I like numbers. I like using an Excel spreadsheet. So when I'm planning or when I'm evaluating services, not only do I look at the money that I'm spending, I also look at the staff time to do the program. So you could break your population down by public, private, and homeschooled if you wanted to, and you could break your budget down. You can only go so far with your money, right? So, you know, the easiest thing to do is to write everything down, take a step back, you know, let it sit there, and then try to look at it objectively. And when I did that, that's when I came to the conclusion that I could not justify doing too many events during regular school hours because of our small size. Our money goes the furthest when we offer events after regular school hours. That way I can say, hey, it's open to everybody. You know, these dollars that I spent for this program target every, you know, child in this age range. So it's just something to think about. But I'm not saying don't have special events. It's okay to do that. But just remember that you want to, if you're doing special events at the library during school hours, you want to consider trying to schedule a program at the school also. Okay, so here's a good example. This is a real example, my example of the population in Thomasville. If you allocate most of your resources so that all students have access, all of the students actually get more from your library. This is an example. If you take a $5,000 budget and a $1,000 staff hour budget, and I divide it by my student population, so this is a real figure for me. The largest group that I serve is the public school group of 1,600. The next size group that I'm serving is about 600 kids in the area that attend a private school near town. And then there's a smaller group of the homeschooled students, and they are robust library users, so they seem way bigger than that. But, you know, if you break it down by the numbers and percentages, the largest group, the public school group, would get the bulk of my budget, and they would get the bulk of my staff time. And then so on. Private would get their portion, and the homeschool kids would actually get a really small amount. So that's why I said just, you know, try to do stuff after school if you can. It may take a while to build in attendance, because anytime you try something new in an area, you can usually plan on at least a year for that new event to be advertised enough that people remember it and work it into their schedule. So don't get discouraged if you don't have a lot of, you know, students after school at a program. I would say just keep trying it and tweaking it. But we do okay. You know, we've learned that after 5, nobody will come to anything here. We've learned that on Saturdays the programs don't do very well, and in the afternoon from 3:30 to 5 on school afternoons, Monday through Thursday, those work for Thomasville, Alabama. So that's what we do. You know, so it's just all a matter of figuring out what works and trying to schedule your programs to meet the information needs there. So, but in this example, I mean, you can see that the homeschoolers, by me offering the services after 3 or 3:30, the homeschoolers are actually getting access to way more than I could do fairly any other way than using this formula. Any questions, Jamie?
Not right now.
Okay. All right, so we're going to head into, this is kind of the last area that we talk about, staff development. And like I said, you have to be an advocate for your library, and you need to be an advocate always ready to to make it relevant for people that have questions for you or that question what you're doing or why you're doing it. Like, for instance, why do you let that group use your room so much? Well, be ready, be ready to explain that and how, they have an educational purpose in their nonprofit and they qualify to use your room. Does that make sense? I think so. And then just as long as you're on firm ground in your own mind, you know your policies, you understand the information needs of your community, and you feel confident that you're spending the money wisely, then you just really be ready to defend, be nice about it, but don't get pushed around, because you're the librarian, right, and you know your job. So, but here in Thomasville, I did run into, we have some part-timers, and you think that it's absolutely, everybody knows how to smile and make eye contact, right? They don't, and that's something that I didn't understand until I became the director and I did some studies, and I realized, hey, this person, I could train them to do this, and I could put it into their training schedule and have them initial that they understand and they've been, that they've received training in order to communicate with people when they come in. And then if they don't do this, then they're not doing their job, right? So don't get stuck with somebody who is a bad face for you at the front desk. Everybody, I don't care who you are, everybody can smile, they can make eye contact and use positive body language to help people. And this is especially important for homeschool families that are coming in. And, well, I don't want to say teachers, students, local school personnel, homeschooling parents, kids in any school environment, they need to run into a helpful person at the front desk that will listen to them. It's not your job to say yes all the time, but it's your job to engage, to let them know that you care about what they need and what they're asking for. And then if you can help them easily, that's great. If it's a question about something you're not sure about, then you definitely want to, bump that around to somebody else. I think it's awesome when you have more established staff members and they mentor newer members, because believe me, in the last 2 years, our relationships with students in our area, it has skyrocketed because I'm requiring everyone that works here. I don't care if your main job is working with computers. I don't care if your main job is shelving books. Everybody that works here is required to receive training in how to interact with the public as they come in. And because of that, our relationship with all of the students in the area has just gone through the roof in the last 2 years. So it takes about a year for them to kind of catch on that you really do want to engage them. And once they figure that out, then they'll just knock your door down coming in and using your library and your services. So don't let, a grouch or a non-social person get away with that at your library. Just make sure that everybody knows how to engage your patrons. Tell your staff, hey, when they're like, oh, well, they asked for all this and they want this and they need these stack of books, and then they keep, and you just look at them and then you say, yeah, isn't that great? They're so comfortable with us that they feel they can ask us for help and they expect to get it. So, look at everything from a positive perspective. And on the left, these are some of our homeschooling families. And they're really nice. They're wonderful library users. But when they come in as a group. Their kids run back and forth. They're throwing books on the desk to be checked out one at a time, like every 2 minutes, And so you just want to say, don't come up here until you're ready to check out. But anyway, don't, just be patient with them because they love you. Here's something that we're doing this actually works. We train our families, our power users like this, families that come in for different events and stuff. We train them to help us by waiting, like their kids know, hey, you can bring stuff to the desk, but we're not going to start checking you out until your mom's up here. You know, that way you're not starting and stopping and having to, you know, check out 10 separate items on the same card. So we train the parents that we like to do things together all at once, and that saves us some time. If they need help, we ask them to write it on a little slip as they come in the door. And like in this case where you've got, say, 3 families coming in together, if they'll write what they need on slips, that gives us time to process the request, and then, you know, we can answer the phone, we can help other people in the meantime while we're working on their request, and then they know that we're going to come and find them and address, you know, their question when we have the answer ready. So, you know, it's a way to not have a backlog at the front desk. I start sweating bullets when I've got a big crowd at the front desk. I'm just so, I get so nervous because I don't like people to have to wait. And so this kind of reduces the stress for everybody if you can just have a little process and you know, you train them to use that. And so, you know, and we let our parents check out their whole family on one card. We just let them do that. It's just easier for us to check cards and renew things that way. All right, I don't know if you can tell or not, I am a die-hard Democratic librarian. I believe in democracy. I believe that what public libraries do is so important. And you've got to protect your broad mission. You know, so you can't specialize in serving homeschool families, but what you can do is you can knock it out of the park at serving students and families, okay? So serving homeschoolers is part of that, but it's not all that we do as a library, so just remember to protect your broad mission, because it's so tempting to just say yes to everything that the homeschoolers ask for, because they come to the library so much and they check out so many books and they come to all of our programs and we just love them. So, you know, you're tempted to just say yes to everything, but just remember that there's a whole group of students out there that are in an institutional school, and just remember that I truly believe if they were offered the chance to come to the library during the day, that they would come. So be mindful of them, and you know, try to keep it fair. Here's one of our local school tours that came in, the 3rd grade class. I think they sum it up well. If you balance your services among all student groups, and if you plan most of your activities after regular school hours, the students in the area will start to trust the library, and you will be more relevant to them and to their families, and that means that you're doing a good job of serving the community. Here's a few little pictures, and it's hard to tell just looking at them, but these are teams that help us with things, and they're from a variety of school backgrounds, public, private, and homeschool. So the groups can work together. They can benefit your library. And this is a list of, I just broke down some of the things that we do to help students, because I'm constantly getting questions about, well, you know, if you did this while the homeschoolers were at your library, what are you doing for the, you know, the school kids? So I kind of looked at every resource that we have, and this page is all about the things that we're doing that are available to every student in our service area. Okay, so make a list for your library. What are you doing? Break it down. We put a lot of time and money into making sure that our computers work well, that we have the software that the kids need, that we have a good printer, the Wi-Fi, the wireless printing, all of that. So, you know, take a look at what you're doing and write it down. You'll be surprised at how much you're doing for students. And also, if you've got it on if you've already got it organized, then when someone asks you about it, you're ready. You're ready to defend your library and to tell them how great you are. Also, you need to write a list. Try to think, now what am I doing that targets just one group of students? And I'm doing things that target just one group of students. I do it, you do it. But it's interesting to note that the city school system, they're getting many targeted services at their population. The Boys and Girls Club gets a different set of special programs and services, and the homeschooled students do as well. So if they ask you, you know, hey, why are you doing this for the homeschoolers? Have that other list in your mind ready to go. Hey, but we're doing this for the public school, and we're doing this for the Boys and Girls Club, and we're, you know, to show them that you're well-rounded. And when people see kids out during school hours, they automatically notice that, and they don't notice anything else. So be ready to tell them about everything you're doing, you know. I did want to mention for our story hour, that has been, we have a certain number of seats. They're available. We have crafts ready for that number. About 3 years ago, we changed our policy to allow older kids into the vacant seats. So it is not a story hour for homeschooled kids. And thank you, Lucy. I see that you, yeah, I like to write things out. People ask me things, and I can't think of a good response, but then 2 hours later, I think of a great response then, but it's too late. So go ahead and kind of write out what you're doing that helps all students, and then what you're doing for the different groups. And you'll feel better knowing that you're being fair, and then also you'll be a better advocate for what you are doing when someone asks you about it. And if you have one group and it has a long list and there are other groups that don't have much on their list, then, you know, I hate to say it, but you've got to look at that and ask yourself, can I do more for this group, you know? So we weren't doing as much for the city school kids, and about 2 years ago I reevaluated everything, and we started applying this fair and consistent policy and this fair way to spend the budget and the staff hours. And since then, we all feel much more positive about our jobs and about the students are interacting with us better, and so it's kind of validated us in our community. But about the story hour, so we have these vacant seats, and it's like that room that you're allowing the homeschool kids to use, you know, more than once a month. We have these seats that are not being filled, so our rule is that at the librarian's discretion, if there are vacant seats that are not filled by 3- and 4-year-olds, we can allow older students into these seats. So that's just a common sense. It would just be petty to say, no, you can't come to story hour because you're too old when you have these vacant seats that are available. So we applied some common sense there, and we'll allow up through 4th grade to come in to the empty seats. And then if they're older than that, they have to go to book clubs after school, or they have to volunteer just like all the other students do. So, and then recently we announced free cards for teachers, and we give them some little perks. And teachers, whether they're parent educators or whether they're teaching in a public or a private setting, they influence hundreds of students and their parents. So we are trying to cultivate a better relationship with the teachers too. And then I just this is just a summary of everything that I looked at when I was studying this subject. And it's not a big deal, but it is in the slideshow if you want to kind of summarize what we talked about. And once again, here's the staff. And I tell you, we're just a little country staff in a small library in rural Alabama, but we love our community, and we want the absolute best for our community. So students are a big, big deal here. And I think we're doing a better job serving them this year, but I'm still making plans to improve some things. So any other questions?
Thank you, Gina. One comment came through from Sarah, who mentioned a lot of what you're talking about is for a bigger staff. And I know you don't, looking at your photo, you don't have a large staff, but how do you do some of these things if you're a single employee library? And she mentions, when the homeschoolers come in and they have many, it can feel like a whirlwind for several hours. So do you have any advice for that?
I do, and I feel your pain because in 2000, at the end of 2005, we had 2 full-time positions created at the library. Up until then, we had 1 full-time position. And even with 3 full-timers, you only have 1 or 2 at the library. What I would do is one of the slides talks about how to educate your parents to help you out. So put that in writing, kind of make up a plan. When you come in, I want you to put your books that you're returning, put them here, I want you to put a note about which books to be renewed, put it here, and then when you're ready to check out, wait until the whole family's ready before you come back to the desk, and use some little request slips for them to write things that they need help with so that you can take those one at a time. But with 1 staff member, that's not going to work. So you've got to deputize somebody. And I often say some of the older kids would be very, you have to be careful. You can't just say any older child, but you've worked with them enough. You know who has the personality and who is responsible enough that you can train them to help you to process the check-ins, check-outs, and requests while the crowd is there. So, for instance, we have a family that comes in and they have 4 children. The oldest is a young teen, and this teen is very, very responsible, and so we gave her the leadership role of policing the check-ins, the check-outs, etc. for her family. And we train her to do it, and we allow her to use our computer to check in and check out, and she does a great job. I hope that's some help.
I think so. We are just about out of time. So I do want to mention that, yes, the presentation and Gina's slides will be available on our website later today. We do have another webinar coming up in March, on March 17th, on ditching Dewey. So if you're interested in signing up for that, please go to our website under Continuing Education, and you can find the registration link for that. So I want to thank all of you for listening in today and for your participation in this presentation. I want to thank Gina for her excellent information. I hope you all have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week. So long.